A gay friend of mine told me that he saw my wife in a gay club with another woman. Hearing something like that throws everything into question. I trusted my wife, and while our marriage had its ups and downs, this was not something I ever imagined I'd have to deal with. I didn't even know how to process the information at first. The whole situation felt surreal. My mind raced through every interaction we'd had lately, trying to pick apart her behavior for signs I might have missed. She had been going out more often, claiming it was just girls' nights out with her friends. At the time, I didn't think much of it. After all, we've both had our individual social lives, and I didn't want to be the controlling husband. But now, knowing she had been seen in a gay club with another woman, I felt like I was standing on shaky ground. Had I been blind this whole time? I started replaying all those nights when she'd come home late, often smelling of perfume that wasn't her usual scent. I brushed it off as her enjoying time with her friends, but now I couldn't help but wonder if there was more to it. Maybe there had been signs, small ones that I'd dismissed because I trusted her completely. I found myself questioning everything. The way she had been distant lately, how we hadn't been as close as we used to be, not just emotionally but physically too. I had thought it was just a phase, something all couples go through after being together for so long. But was that really it? Or had she been pulling away because she was hiding something? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the thought of her being involved with someone else, especially a woman, hit me like a punch in the gut. It wasn't just the idea of infidelity, it was the realization that there might be parts of her life that I didn't know about, parts she had kept hidden from me. I knew I couldn't ignore it. I had to confront her, but I also knew that I needed to approach this carefully. I didn't want to accuse her without understanding what was really going on. Maybe my friend was mistaken, or maybe there was an explanation that didn't involve cheating. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, and I needed to find out what it was before it drove me crazy. I had a few options. I could confront her outright, ask her about the night she was seen at the club, or I could try to gather more information first, see if there was a pattern I'd missed. Either way, I knew that this wasn't something I could just brush aside. Whatever was happening, I needed to know the truth. When I first came up with the idea of testing Sophie's loyalty by suggesting a night out at a gay club, I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Maybe I just wanted to see how she would react. Part of me knew it was a risky move, and it could easily backfire, but curiosity got the better of me. Our relationship had been feeling off lately, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing. Sophie and I had been together for years, and we had always been open with each other. But lately, things had felt distant. She'd been going out more often, coming home late without much of an explanation. It was the little things, too, the way she avoided eye contact when certain topics came up, or how her phone seemed to be glued to her side, always on silent. These were things I would have ignored a year ago, trusting her completely. But now, I wasn't so sure. So, I figured I'd test her. I wanted to see if there was anything behind that distance. One evening, when we were sitting together after dinner, I casually brought it up. "Hey, have you ever thought about going to a gay club?" I said, trying to keep my tone light, as if I were just suggesting any random idea. It could be fun, right? You know, something different, a change of pace. I kept my eyes on her, waiting to gauge her reaction. At first, she didn't say anything, just continued scrolling through her phone. Then, she glanced up, raising an eyebrow. "A gay club? You and me?" she asked, her voice casual, but I could sense a hint of confusion. "Yeah," I said, leaning back in my chair, trying to play it cool. "Why not? Could be fun to mix things up." She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching my face as if trying to figure out where this idea was coming from. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but I noticed a slight shift in her posture, something subtle, like she was suddenly more aware of the conversation than before. "Are you serious?" she finally asked, her voice calm but curious. I shrugged, giving her a nonchalant smile. "Yeah, why not? You've been going out with your friends a lot lately, so I thought we could try something different. Plus, it's not like there's any pressure. Just for fun." Sophie set her phone down, her fingers lightly tapping the edge of the table. I could see the gears turning in her mind, and I couldn't help but wonder what she was really thinking. Was she suspicious? Did she see through my suggestion? Or was she considering it? Well, I don't know, she trailed off, looking away for a second. Then she laughed, a soft, almost nervous sound. I mean, I guess it could be interesting, she added, but there was something in her tone that didn't sit right with me. Was she testing me back? Was she deflecting? Or maybe she was genuinely intrigued. I couldn't tell, and that made me even more anxious. Interesting, huh? I said, my voice steady, though inside I was anything but calm. Yeah, it could be. Just a night out. No big deal. Sophie shifted in her seat again, biting her lips slightly as she considered the idea. You know, I've never been to one before, she admitted, and her tone had lightened. It could be fun. But why the sudden interest? There it was, the question I had been expecting. I'd been preparing for it, but now that it was here, I found myself scrambling for the right words. I didn't want to give too much away, but I also didn't want to come off as overly suspicious. Oh, no reason really, I said, trying to sound as casual as possible. Just thought it would be a new experience. You know, see what it's like. She stared at me for a moment longer, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she were trying to figure out if there was more to my suggestion. Then, to my surprise, she smiled. All right, she said. Let's do it. Could be fun. Her reaction left me more confused than before. She didn't hesitate. She didn't seem put off by the idea. If anything, she seemed intrigued, almost excited. But was that because she genuinely thought it would be a fun experience? Or was there something else behind her eagerness to go? The whole conversation left me feeling uneasy. I had hoped that bringing it up would give me some sort of clarity, some sign that she wasn't interested, or that the whole thing was just a silly suggestion. But now, I wasn't sure what to think. Her response didn't give me the answers I was looking for. If anything, it raised more questions. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but her enthusiasm for the idea unsettled me. Was I reading too much into it? Or was she hiding something? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that suggesting the gay club as a test might have been a mistake. Sophie's reaction had thrown me completely off balance. Instead of feeling relieved or reassured, I was now tangled in a web of even more doubts. Her casual acceptance of the idea, the ease with which she agreed, was it a sign that I was overthinking things, or was there something lurking beneath the surface that I hadn't seen before? The next few days passed in a blur, and the upcoming night out was all I could think about. I tried to act normal around Sophie, but every little interaction felt loaded with meaning. Was she excited about the club because she was genuinely curious, or was she hiding something? I hated how paranoid I had become, but the uncertainty gnawed at me. Finally, the night arrived. Sophie dressed up, looking as gorgeous as ever, but there was something different in her energy. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, maybe it was just my own nerves getting the better of me. She seemed more playful, more vibrant than she had been in a while. That should have been a good thing, but instead, it only added to my confusion. As we got into the car and headed toward the club, I kept glancing over at her, trying to read her expression. She was scrolling through her phone, humming softly to the music, looking completely at ease. Meanwhile, my mind was spinning with questions I couldn't answer. When we arrived at the club, the neon lights flashed in the night, and the faint thrum of music pulsed through the walls. I had never been to a place like this before, and walking in felt like stepping into a different world, one I wasn't sure I belonged in. But Sophie, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. She slipped her hand into mine as we walked through the doors, giving me a reassuring smile. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. People were dancing, laughing, and chatting in clusters around the bar. There was a sense of freedom in the air, a carefree energy that made me feel like an outsider looking in. Sophie, though, seemed to fit right in. She looked around, taking it all in with an almost childlike curiosity. "What do you think?" she asked, leaning in close to my ear so I could hear her over the music. "It's different," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But yeah, it's interesting." Sophie laughed and pulled me toward the bar. "Come on, let's grab a drink." We ordered a couple of cocktails and found a spot near the edge of the dance floor, watching the crowd. As the night went on, Sophie loosened up more and more. She laughed at jokes, struck up conversations with strangers, and even danced a bit. I tried to enjoy myself too, but my mind kept wandering back to my original plan. This was supposed to be a test, right? But what was I testing for? Was I trying to catch her in something? Or was I just hoping for reassurance that everything was fine? After a while, Sophie wandered off to grab another drink, leaving me alone to my thoughts. I watched her move through the crowd, the way she smiled and interacted with people, and I couldn't help but wonder if this was the real Sophie, the one I hadn't seen in a while. She seemed so carefree, so at ease here, and that unsettled me. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something about this place, this environment, that brought out a different side of her. I was nursing my drink, lost in thought, when Sophie returned, but she wasn't alone. She had a woman with her, someone I hadn't noticed before. They were laughing, clearly hitting it off. The woman was tall, with short hair and a confident, easy smile. She leaned in close to Sophie, and for a moment, I felt like I was on the outside of some inside joke. "Jack, this is Anna," Sophie said, introducing the woman with a bright smile. "We were just talking at the bar." "Hey, nice to meet you," Anna said, her tone friendly but direct. I shook her hand, but my mind was racing again. Why had Sophie brought her over? Was this part of the test, or was I just being paranoid again? The three of us stood there for a few minutes, making small talk, but I couldn't focus. My eyes kept flicking back and forth between Sophie and Anna, wondering if there was more to their conversation than met the eye. Eventually, Sophie grabbed my hand and led me toward the dance floor. "Come on, Jack, let's dance," she said, her eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and something else, something I couldn't quite place. We danced for a while, but my heart wasn't in it. I was too distracted, too busy trying to read into every move, every glance, every laugh. Sophie seemed completely at ease, lost in the moment, but I couldn't let go of the nagging feeling in my gut. Then, at one point, she leaned in close to my ear and whispered, "What do you think of Anna?" The question caught me off guard. She seems nice," I said, trying to play it cool. Sophie smiled, but there was something in her expression, something playful and teasing. "Yeah, she's cool," she said. "She was telling me about all these places she's been to around here. Maybe we should check them out sometime." I nodded, trying to hide my unease, but inside, my thoughts were spiraling again. Was Sophie testing me now? Was this her way of turning the tables? Or was she genuinely interested in making a new friend? I couldn't tell. As the night wore on, I found myself more confused than ever. The whole point of this was supposed to be to test Sophie, to see if there was anything behind the distance I'd been feeling. But now, standing here in the middle of this club, surrounded by strangers, I realized that the test had only made things more complicated. I didn't know what I was looking for anymore, and I wasn't sure if I was prepared for the answers. Sophie was still dancing, lost in the music, when I excused myself and headed to the bar for some space. As I stood there, watching her from a distance, I couldn't help but wonder if this was all in my head. Maybe there was nothing going on, and I had let my insecurities get the better of me. But even then, I knew that once doubt had taken root, it was hard to shake. This night hadn't given me the answers I was looking for, but it had made one thing clear: I needed to talk to Sophie. Really talk. Not just throw out tests and hope for the best. I needed to understand what was happening between us before I drove myself crazy with suspicion. As I finished my drink, I made a decision. When we got home, I was going to sit her down and ask her straight out, no games, no tests, just the truth. Because I couldn't keep living like this, questioning everything. I needed to know where we stood. That night at the gay club had left me feeling more confused than ever. I went in hoping to test Sophie, but I walked out with more questions than answers. She seemed to enjoy herself far too much, maybe even more than I expected. And that encounter with Anna? It left me wondering if there was something deeper going on, something she wasn't telling me. A few days later, I decided to bring it up again, wanting to clear the air and finally get some answers. We were sitting on the couch, just watching TV, and I felt that familiar tension rise in me. The thoughts from that night still lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. The conversation we'd had, her interactions at the club, and the way she seemed so comfortable, even excited, in that environment, all of it was like a puzzle I couldn't solve. So, about the other night, I started, keeping my tone as casual as I could. You seem to really enjoy yourself at the club. Sophie glanced at me with a curious smile, raising an eyebrow as if she wasn't sure where I was going with this. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, we had a good time, didn't we? Yeah, it was interesting, I said, still choosing my words carefully. I wasn't ready to throw my suspicions at her all at once. But I just wanted to ask, was there something about that night that stood out to you? Her smile faltered for a moment, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. She looked away for a second, as if deciding whether to answer honestly or brush it off. Then she turned back to me, her expression soft but thoughtful. What do you mean? I don't know, I said, leaning forward, trying to keep my tone steady. You seemed pretty into it. More than I expected. She paused for a moment, then shrugged. It was just something different, you know? A change of pace. It's not like we do stuff like that often. I nodded, but I could tell she wasn't giving me the full story. There was something in the way she spoke, the way she avoided eye contact, that told me there was more to it than just having fun at the club. But how could I press her without sounding paranoid? And what about Anna? I asked, deciding to push a little further. You two seemed to hit it off. Sophie hesitated, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of something, maybe guilt, maybe excitement. I wasn't sure. But she quickly regained her composure, smiling lightly. She was nice. We just talked for a bit. It wasn't a big deal. I tried to read her face, but she was keeping things deliberately vague. It frustrated me because I knew there was more she wasn't saying. But instead of admitting anything, she deflected. Then, a few days later, Sophie brought it up herself, completely out of the blue. We were having dinner, just a normal evening, when she suddenly looked at me with a curious smile. You know, she said, her voice casual but with an undertone that I couldn't ignore, I've been thinking. About what? I asked, setting down my fork, sensing this was about to turn into something more serious. About going back to the club, she said, her eyes locking with mine. I had a lot of fun, and I thought maybe we could go again sometime. I stared at her, not sure how to respond. I hadn't expected her to bring it up, let alone suggest going back. You really want to go again? I asked, trying to keep the surprise out of my voice. Yeah, she said, her tone light but deliberate. It was a good time, and, well, she trailed off, looking at me with a playful glint in her eyes. It kind of turned me on, you know? That confession hit me like a ton of bricks. Sophie, the woman I thought I knew so well, was sitting here telling me that the gay club had excited her, turned her on, and she wanted to go back. It was like she was testing me now, flipping the situation on its head. Really? I asked, my voice calm, but inside, my mind was racing. What about it, exactly? She shrugged, but there was something almost coy about the way she did it. I don't know. I guess just being in that environment. It felt exciting. Different. I mean, don't you think? I didn't know what to say. I had gone into that night with my own suspicions, thinking it was a test for her. Now, here she was, admitting that it excited her, that she wanted to go back. And for what? Did she want to explore something more? Was there more to her attraction to the club than just curiosity? What are you saying, Sophie? I asked, needing clarity. You want to keep going back to gay clubs because it excites you? She smiled again, leaning in slightly as if sharing a secret. I'm just saying it was fun. We had a good time, and I thought maybe we could explore it more. Together. Her words hung in the air between us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't admitting. She didn't outright say it, but her excitement about the club, the way she brought it up again, it all made me wonder, was there something she was hiding? Or was this just about the thrill of the experience? I couldn't tell. But one thing was clear, this wasn't the reaction I had expected. Instead of getting answers, I found myself with even more questions. Did she want to push the boundaries of our relationship? Was she interested in something more than just the two of us? Do you really want to do that? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. Go back and, what? Keep testing things? Sophie tilted her head, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. Maybe, she said, her voice soft but deliberate. I mean, it was fun, right? And who knows, it might be even more fun next time. I sat there, staring at her, not sure how to process it all. Was she trying to tell me something deeper? Or was this just about a thrill she wanted to explore? Either way, I wasn't sure if I was ready for where this might lead. The thought of going back to the club didn't scare me, it intrigued me, sure, but I was starting to realize that there was more at stake here than just a night out. There were layers to this, layers I hadn't even considered when I first made that suggestion to test her. Now, it seemed like the test was on me, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. Sophie leaned back in her chair, still watching me, waiting for my response. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't know what to say. I had wanted answers, but now that she was giving me a glimpse into her desires, I wasn't sure if I was prepared to face the truth. That night, when we decided to go back to the gay club, I still wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. The first time had already left me with more questions than answers, but now Sophie had made it clear, this wasn't just about having fun. There was something deeper, something that excited her, something she wanted to explore. And as much as I had my doubts, a part of me was undeniably curious. We walked into the club again, and this time, I felt different. The flashing lights, the pulsing music, the vibrant energy of the place, it was all the same as before, but now there was a sense of anticipation that hung between us, unspoken yet palpable. Sophie held my hand as we made our way through the crowd, and I noticed how comfortable she seemed here, how effortlessly she fit into the scene. It was like a part of her came alive in this place, a side of her I had never really seen before. We reached the bar, and Sophie turned to me with that playful smile I was starting to recognize all too well. Without saying a word, she sat me down on one of the stools and leaned in close, her breath warm against my ear as she whispered, "Sit here and enjoy the view, and then we'll go home and make love." Her words sent a jolt through me. It was more than just a casual suggestion, it was a command, a promise, and something about it lit a fire inside me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The thought of what might happen next both excited and unnerved me, but I couldn't deny the surge of anticipation that was building within me. Sophie didn't waste any time. She stood up, and before I knew it, she was making her way toward the dance floor. I watched as she moved through the crowd, the flashing lights casting her in a kaleidoscope of colors. She was confident, magnetic, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I watched her disappear into the sea of people. For a few moments, I just sat there, nursing my drink, wondering what the hell was happening. My head was spinning. Was this what she had wanted all along? To explore this side of herself? And where did that leave me? The questions kept swirling, but I didn't have time to dwell on them for long. Because then I saw her, Sophie, dancing with another woman. At first, it was subtle. The two of them were close, their bodies swaying to the beat of the music, just another pair lost in the rhythm of the club. But as I watched, things began to heat up. Sophie leaned in closer to the woman, her hands resting lightly on her hips, and then, without hesitation, she kissed her. My heart stopped for a second. Sophie was kissing another woman right in front of me, and she wasn't holding back. It wasn't just a quick peck or a playful tease, it was passionate, intense. Her hands slid up the woman's back as they moved together, their bodies pressed close, lips locked in a kiss that seemed to go on forever. I was stunned. Part of me wanted to look away, to pretend I hadn't seen what was happening, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, watching as my wife kissed someone else, and the strangest part of all, despite the shock, despite the confusion, I was incredibly aroused. I didn't expect to feel that way. I had imagined myself getting angry, jealous, maybe even storming out of the club. But instead, I just sat there, my eyes glued to them, my pulse racing, as the heat in my body rose with every second. It wasn't just the sight of Sophie kissing another girl that got to me, it was the way she seemed to lose herself in it, the way she was so completely absorbed in the moment. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, just pure, raw passion. I could feel the tightness in my chest, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I was torn between disbelief and desire, unable to reconcile the two. This was my wife, the woman I had shared my life with, and yet here she was, kissing someone else in front of me, and I couldn't deny how much it turned me on. Sophie finally pulled back from the kiss, her lips slightly parted, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. She turned her head and caught my eye from across the room, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Her gaze was electric, filled with something I couldn't quite name, lust, excitement, power. She smiled at me, that same playful, teasing smile, as if she knew exactly what I was feeling. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my body tense. I was still processing what I had just seen, but I couldn't deny that I was aroused, more than I had been in a long time. There was something about the whole scene, the way Sophie had so confidently kissed that woman, the way she looked at me afterward, it was intoxicating. I didn't know what this meant for us, for our relationship, but in that moment, I didn't care. All I knew was that Sophie had promised we'd go home and make love, and after what I had just witnessed, that was the only thing on my mind. Sophie made her way back to me, her cheeks flushed, her eyes still sparkling with that mischievous energy. She slid onto the barstool next to me, her leg brushing against mine, and leaned in close once again. "So," she whispered, her voice low and sultry, "did you enjoy the view?" I could barely find my voice, still reeling from everything I had just seen. "Yeah," I managed to say, my voice hoarse with desire. "I did." She smiled again, her lips curling into that seductive grin that made my heart race. "Good," she said. "Because I wasn't kidding about what's going to happen when we get home." I nodded, my mind still spinning, but one thing was clear, whatever was going on between us, whatever this new dynamic was, I was all in. Sophie had pushed the boundaries, and I had followed her right over the edge. There was no turning back now. We stayed at the club for a little while longer, but my mind was already racing ahead to what would happen next. As we finally left and made our way home, I couldn't shake the image of Sophie kissing that woman, the way it had made me feel. It was confusing, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. But as we walked through the door of our house, I realized that this was just the beginning. Sophie had opened a door to something new, something I hadn't even considered before, and now that it was open, there was no telling where it would lead. But for now, I didn't care. All that mattered was the fire that had been ignited between us, and I was ready to see how far it would burn. When we finally got home, there was an undeniable tension between us, thick with the kind of anticipation that we hadn't felt in years. As soon as the door clicked shut behind us, Sophie was on me, her hands running up my chest, her lips crashing into mine with a hunger that took me by surprise. There was no hesitation, no teasing, just raw desire that flooded the room and set my entire body on fire. It had been a long time since we had touched each other like this, like we were desperate for one another, like nothing else in the world mattered but this moment. Sophie pushed me back against the wall, her fingers digging into my shirt as she kissed me harder, her breath hot and urgent against my skin. Every part of her seemed alive, electric, and I could feel her excitement radiating off her. I wasn't thinking anymore. My mind, which had been racing all night with questions and doubts, was completely silent now. All I could focus on was the way she felt against me, the way her body moved with mine, how every touch, every kiss seemed to stoke the fire between us even higher. We stumbled into the bedroom, shedding clothes as we went, and by the time we reached the bed, we were both breathless, our bodies already tangled together. Sophie's hands were everywhere, her touch as demanding as it was soft, and I couldn't get enough of her. It was like we were rediscovering each other, finding parts of one another that we had forgotten about, buried under the routine of daily life. The way she kissed me, the way she pulled me closer, it was like she was pouring all of the energy, all of the passion from the night at the club into this moment. And I was doing the same. Everything I had felt, everything that had stirred inside me when I watched her earlier, was now surging through my body, and I couldn't hold it back. We made love as passionately as we hadn't in a long time. It was different this time, not just because of what had happened earlier, but because there was something new between us, something we had never explored before. It was like we had crossed a line together, ventured into unknown territory, and now we were reaping the rewards of it. Every touch, every kiss, every breath was filled with a fire that neither of us had felt in years. Sophie's body responded to mine in ways that felt almost foreign but familiar all at once. I could feel the tension leaving her with every kiss, every movement, as if she had been holding something back for so long and now, finally, it was unleashed. And I matched her, my body moving with hers in perfect sync, the desire between us undeniable. We were lost in it, completely consumed by one another. The world outside didn't matter, not the questions I had been grappling with, not the confusion or doubt. Right now, all that mattered was us, here, in this moment. And when it was over, when we were lying together, breathless and spent, tangled in the sheets, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This wasn't just some experiment we had tried out of curiosity. It was something bigger, something that had changed the way we saw each other, the way we felt about each other. As Sophie rested her head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my skin, I knew with certainty that this wouldn't be the last time we'd go to a gay club. In fact, I realized that we'd be going more often. This new side of Sophie, this thrill that had awakened something inside both of us, it was here to stay. I wasn't sure where this path would lead, but one thing was clear: Sophie had found something that excited her, and I had found something that excited me too. We had opened a door we could never close, and maybe I didn't want to close it. Maybe this was exactly what we needed, something different, something new, to reignite the passion that had been flickering for so long. I looked down at Sophie, her face peaceful, her breathing soft and steady, and I smiled. This was just the beginning. And for the first time in a long while, I was excited about what was coming next.